Hey everyone, it's Relja and this is Motion Graphics in Blender. Today's topic is going to be extruded 3D logo from a single transparent image. Now if you're not a Blender professional, you might be wondering why would anyone do that? Why would anyone need that? But if you are a professional and you're working with clients, you know exactly what I'm talking about. You see, a lot of clients don't have access to their original vector files created for their logo, and usually what they're going to have is a single image. If you're lucky, that image is going to be like a transparent PNG in high resolution, but if you're not lucky, it's going to be like low resolution picked up from a header of a website or something with no transparency and whatever, and then you'll have to edit it and get it to where you need it. Now, this technique I borrowed from After Effects because I used to make After Effects templates for Video Hive. That's After Effects marketplace for After Effects templates. And I noticed there's a lot of templates that use 3D extruded logo, but they don't require you to upload your vector file, nor a 3D object or anything like that. So I was wondering, how do they do that? That looked really good, and I knew that that's not really possible with just After Effects, right? So I downloaded several of these and I saw how they do it. This is what they do. They basically stack up layers of a single image one on top of the other. And then for the extrusion part, they use After Effects image effects, or what do they call it? Like filters. That, for example, like bevel and emboss, so you can get a shine on the logo edge or some sort of shading. And as long as these layers are less than a pixel apart in your final rendered video, it doesn't matter. You won't see that separation. You will see it as a smooth surface. So we can do that in Blender, right? Let's take a look again at how do they do that. Like, take a look at this one. This one looks great. Wait a minute. Zoom in and enhance on that region, Lieutenant. Check this out. This is not reflection. This is a fractal noise, right? You can see it, right? It's completely unrealistic, but your eye thinks it's real because it goes by so fast and it doesn't matter. So it's a noise. In After Effects, it's called fractal noise. And it's 2D effect. We are lucky. In Blender has 3D effect, 3D noise it's like a spatial noise. So we can move it both up and down, left and right through the space. That's going to be useful for us. And we can do this in Blender. It's going to be a little bit difficult because Blender doesn't really give you a real-time preview of noise texture when you assign it to an object or something like that. So we're going to have to be patient with previews. But if we think about it, we can do it. So let's analyze how reflection behaves in real life on objects, because we're gonna have to make it look real. It won't be real, but for your eye, it has to look kind of real. So when you have a surface like this one and camera rotates around it, you can see that for a flat surface like this, reflection kind of goes in the same direction the camera goes, except it goes a little bit faster. It's not like static on the screen. So if a camera moves to the right, the reflection pattern on the edge of this object is going to go twice as fast to the right, and that has to do with how rays reflect. I'm not gonna bother you with this. You can just see it in this example. For curved surface, it's a little bit different. This pattern moves in very different speeds, and since we don't know the shape of the logo. I know because I can see the logo, but Blender doesn't know. It doesn't understand what's a curved surface or not. We're just gonna have to settle for the kind of flat surface solution, and it's gonna look good in the final result. You won't notice that in the convex shapes it's moving slower and in the concave ones it's faster, or is it vice versa? I don't know. We're gonna settle for the mid-range solution that's pattern moving twice as fast as camera in the direction of camera movement. Okay, so let's dig in and make this in Blender. Okay, before I begin, I need to check stuff in user preferences here to make sure everything's set up properly. So under File tab, there's auto execute Python scripts. We need that for our drivers, and that needs to be enabled. And under add-ons, we need to check if import images as planes is enabled as well. That will speed things up. So I'm gonna delete this default cube. I'm gonna save the project just in case. And I'm gonna use that import command under import images as planes. and I have something prepared here that I did earlier. This is a logo, and since we're in Blender internal, it's all set up for us. Like you can see this logo here. It's just an image with transparency. So I'm going to switch to cycles render, and I need to remake this material to work with cycles. Okay, so I'm going to go to node editor here, and I'm going to rename this plane to logo front. It's important to keep everything named properly so I can keep track of everything, and I'm going to rename the material to logo front as well. And now in node editor under material setup here, I make sure that logo front is selected and click use nodes. So what we have here is diffuse material, and it's simple plane. I'm going to rotate it so it's facing upwards. And when we go to render view, we need to add that image. I already have it loaded since it was used image texture. It was used in Blender internal. I'm gonna connect that to diffuse input, and obviously it's facing the wrong direction, so I'm gonna rotate this plane. Let me see it now in render view. Yeah, it's fine now. So I'm gonna need transparency here as well. Let me just position the camera to see it better, like this. And we now have like a diffuse material, so I'm gonna add mix shader and transparent BSDF as well, and connect that to this input. But I'm gonna switch it because we need transparency first, and I'm gonna use alpha as a factor for mixing these two. So I'm just gonna rearrange this to make it clearer. And now we have like cycles material with transparency. This is the logo. So now I will shift D, duplicate this plane and move it slightly downwards, just slightly downwards, and I'm gonna add a array modifier. Here it is, array, and I'm gonna use this relative offset is irrelevant. I'm gonna use constant offset because relative offset uses object dimensions, and there are none here because it's a simple plane. Okay, and I'm gonna use very low value here, very low value, just to pack it tightly. And I'm gonna increase repetitions of this array modifier, so I now have depth to this field, to this object. Let me just save it, just in case. And now if I go to rendered view, it's black. Why is it black? Because we don't have enough light passes in transparency settings. So under light paths, under transparency, I'm gonna increase this to like 64. That's enough. I'm gonna turn off caustics, no need for that. And now you have something that's kind of okay looking for a diffuse look. And if you're aiming for that, you're pretty much done, because you have these stacked up layers of this same logo. And if I select the lamp here, set it to be sun, you can see that sun is casting shadows. Like I can increase this value here. So never mind these lines here, it's gonna be fine in render. Top objects are casting shadow on bottom objects, and it's kind of okay. You have shading on the corners and everything. But that's not what I want to do. You see, I want reflections, I want ambient occlusion and all that stuff, and for that I'm gonna need to fake it heavily. Let me just select border so this renders faster in viewport. So I'm gonna need emission. I'm here under logo. Let's rename this to logo extrusion. So I know what I'm working with, and I'm gonna have this diffuse material replaced with emission material, because then I can actually fake everything. And I want to achieve something like Blender Internal's shadeless material, but emission material actually casts light around the scene, right? So I replace this diffuse BSDF with emission. And if I have a plane here, I'm gonna show you what's going on. I'm gonna lower it down. You can see that this material is actually emitting light in the color of this logo. If I make this darker, increase the strength of the emission material, you can see a little bit of light in like green and red and blue on the surface down there. What I want actually is some kind of a shadeless material. So let me just set everything in this. I need this logo on top of this plane here, this floor. Let me see it from the side. Okay, I'm gonna lift this up. Okay, if
If I go to render view, okay, so now we have this like emissive material, and I'm gonna make it shadeless by playing around with light path. So I'm gonna add another mix shader, and I'm gonna plug in the transparent one as well again here, and I'm gonna add light path node. Input light path, and I'm gonna plug in the diffuse ray here. So if something's diffuse ray, it will be acting like transparent material, not emissive. So now it's not casting light on this floor. It's now kind of shadeless material. Now, as I mentioned, Blender doesn't know that this is an object. This is just a bunch of planes all facing upwards, and some pixels on it are transparent and some are opaque. And that's it. I, as a human, know that this is a circle with some cut out parts. So to get those reflections properly, we have to do it manually. We have to fake it because Blender doesn't know where the curvature is. So now I'm gonna add a new material to this extrusion part. So just click plus here, and I'm gonna rename it to logo extrusion. Okay, and because it's gonna behave differently from the top part. So I'm adding a noise texture here, and I'm gonna mix it with the image of the logo. Okay, so I'm gonna use color mix node. Wait, I'm setting it to multiply, and I'm gonna connect this factor output of a noise texture to it. So now it darkens that extrusion a bit. I'm gonna reduce the scale, something like 3, and I'm gonna add input texture coordinate here. And I'm gonna use object to control this noise. So I'm gonna add an empty in the middle of the scene, like a plain axis. I'm gonna make it slightly smaller so I can manage it better in 3D view. And I'm gonna pick that object here, empty here, and connect object to vector, like object vector, whatever. And under the render view, now I can start controlling this texture. So I'm gonna add mapping, and I really want these to be like lines on the edge here. So it's gonna be very extruded. It's gonna be like 50, 50, 20. That's what I know to be like the correct value. And you can see a little bit of it there. Maybe play with the scale a little bit. That sounds good. And I'm gonna increase this factor so we can see it better. These are going to be our secondary reflections, maybe 10, even more stretched out. So this is going to be like I don't know, like reflecting materials, objects from around the scene. I'm gonna reduce the effect a little bit. Maybe that's too far, like this. And I'm gonna need a color ramp to better control this. So I'm gonna add converter color ramp here. I'm gonna slide these around until I'm happy with how it looks like. Add a little bit more elements to increase complexity here, so you can easily achieve any look you want with just playing with these color ramps. Okay, and now I'm gonna copy this whole setup. This is gonna be our main reflections, like highlights on the edge. And I'm gonna add another mix node, but it's gonna be set to add. And I'm gonna, no, not color, but yeah, color. So I'm gonna need to scale these differently, so it's different from our original noise pattern. This is gonna be much larger, and you can play with both scale and mapping as well. And I will make this much simpler color ramp. It's just gonna be simple black and white transition, very sharp. I'm gonna add this object vector. So I can make this black and move the white all the way next to black, so we have very harsh highlights. And you can play with this value until I'm just gonna wanna see what looks kind of okay now. I will fine tune it later. Too little. A little bit. This is kind of the part where you eyeball it. So more stretched, definitely. Maybe 0.5. Okay, that's gonna look good. So I'm gonna organize stuff a little bit now. I'm gonna add layout frame. I'm gonna name this one highlights. These are gonna be these nodes. I'm gonna put this, come on, get in. Okay. All these nodes into this frame, and I'm gonna have a second one called shadows. Although they're not shadows really, they're just darker reflections on the logo extrusion part. So this makes things more organized, so I can easily find my way around this node setup. Sometimes I just can't decide on what looks good or not. So I just play around with this. Like, this is too much, or although for whatever look you want, you can just play around until you find something you like. I like bigger highlights here. Maybe more detail or not, I don't know. Now I think what really sells this is the bevel effect that I'm gonna add on in between these top planes and array planes. So on the side view, I'm gonna move this extruded part a little bit downward to leave a little bit of space, and I'm gonna Shift D, copy it, move it a little bit upward just underneath that top plane, and I'm gonna immediately rename it because I'm gonna forget later. Bevel, logo bevel. And again, I'm gonna need a new material for that. That's gonna be a copy of extrusion material. I'm gonna rename it to logo bevel as well. And I'm gonna reduce the number of repetitions for array modifier. So I think just 2 is enough. So this is just an object lying in between the top and extrusion part. So under render view, nothing looks different, right? Because it's the same materials. Everything is set up exactly the same. I don't like this very high highlight value. I'm gonna reduce it a little bit for bevel and for extrusion as well. Cool. So it's a little bit better in my opinion. Now you would expect this bevel highlight to reflect things a little bit differently. So I'm gonna select this bevel material and I'm just gonna offset it in X direction. And look, voila! It already looks great. But it can be better, it could be larger, like 5.5 here. Look at it. I mean, I don't know about you, but looking at it like static like this, it already looks like a curved surface on the edge there, right? It's not perfect, but it's good for animation. You're not gonna notice any discrepancies here. Now another thing I want to do is ambient occlusion, and to make that right, I'm gonna make this floor material a little bit brighter, so I can see the ambient occlusion on it. I can do shadow too, but I like ambient occlusion only. So for that we gonna need a separate material, separate object, and that object is gonna be in a separate render layer casting ambient occlusion on the floor here. So I'm gonna select. Wait. Do I need lamp? I'm probably gonna leave it in anyway. So I'm gonna select the extrusion part, Shift D, and move it to layer 3. This is gonna be a separate object in layer 3. And the floor, I'm gonna move to layer 2. Okay. Light 5. I'm gonna leave it. Yeah. So under layers, I'm gonna add all 3 layers to the scene, and I'm gonna only render first 2 for our render, and that means that the object in the 3rd layer is gonna influence the floor, but it will not render, right? And I'm gonna rename it to logo AO, like ambient occlusion, and that can be like a separate material as well, because I need it to render fast. I don't need all this noise. So I'm gonna make it like I'm gonna delete everything, but input and output. Actually, I don't need this. I don't need that either. So I just don't want to make it from scratch. I just want to delete. I don't need this. I don't need this either. Delete. So I'm gonna need transparent, but instead of emission, I'm gonna add a diffuse node, diffuse shader. Shader diffuse. There it is. So now I have like a diffuse material with transparency, right, for logo shape. I'm gonna make it black, and it's gonna just cast ambient occlusion. Now in preview mode, you can see it in between these layers, but it's not gonna render because it's in a separate layer, right? I'm also gonna add this light to all 3 layers just in case I want to add shadow later. So while it's selected, all 3 layers, right? Doesn't hurt. Let's do a test render now. Okay, so the floor is still a little bit dark and I don't see that much ambient occlusion on it. So let me just a moment. I wanna make that floor or world bright. I'm gonna make the floor is gray, so let's make it white. And if I do test render now, it's still missing ambient occlusion. Why is that? Maybe something with light, darker maybe. Nope. Point light. Oh, here it is. I don't know what happened. Probably the sun was probably too bright or something. I don't know. So I'm gonna keep this point light on, and I like the ambient occlusion on the floor there. And I'm gonna make the world color brighter, so it's brighter overall. Something like this. Yeah, that's it. That's what I was aiming for. And I'm not really happy about brightness of these reflections. I'm gonna go to extrusion material and reduce this add mix node to something more subtle. So here I think this is gonna be fine. And you can see if you zoom in here. Okay, if you zoom in here, you can see these black lines. Now that's not the separation between array planes. It's that ambient occlusion object in the 3rd layer. It's not gonna render. It's just visible here in preview mode in Blender. So right here you can uncheck this eye and it's no longer visible. Turn it back again, it's there, but without the eye selected, there's no ambient occlusion in preview, right? So I'm gonna keep it on. It's not gonna render. Now I'm going to add ambient occlusion here on the extrusion part. And to do that, I'm gonna flip this array modifier backwards, like a it's now a negative value. I'm gonna make it a positive value, so it goes upward, not downwards. So its origin is on the bottom, so I'm gonna move it down and just align it again with the bevel part. Okay. So I need its origin down next to the floor, so I can map my ramp texture up from that point. Okay, so let me just go to the perspective view for this, and I'm gonna go to render view, and what I'm gonna need is a gradient texture. Under texture, there is a gradient texture, right? I'm gonna set it to easing, like easing, easing, and I'm gonna need another input texture coordinate node here. So I'm gonna set it to object, and object is gonna be the actual logo extrusion object. So its origin is now the point from which this gradient texture spreads. And I'm gonna add this before this multiply node, before everything, before two of these highlights and multiplied secondary reflections. So another multiply node here, and let me move all this backward, and I'm gonna connect this factor to the multiply node. So right now we can't see much, it just darkened everything. So I'm gonna need another converter color ramp. Okay, so now I can make this a really sharp transition, so I can see it on the actual object. I'm gonna need mapping, and I'm gonna rotate this. Oh, wait, it's all in this frame, and I'm gonna delete it and set it all up again. So gradient and texture coordinate is fine. I need color ramp. It's gonna be very sharp, something like this, and I'm gonna add that vector mapping node. So I'm gonna rotate these by 90 degrees, and now I can scale it down in the Z axis, and you can see it in the preview. Here it is. This is the transition from black to white. So now I can play with both scale and also the color ramp node to get the softness of this ambient occlusion effect, because there's floor down there, and floor should be casting some sort of ambient occlusion on this logo extrusion. So let me just figure out what works best. That's gonna look fine. Let me add the ambient occlusion one added a lot more transparency passes, so I need to increase this. So I can see both, so I need to decide if either I'm going to look at ambient occlusion on the object or on the floor and the object, and it's going to look messed up a little bit. So this is the static setup. It looks fine now. Let's do this test render, and it's looking good as a static image. Now we need to animate it, right? And that's the complicated part. That's where I need to introduce some drivers for those empty objects that are controlling the placement of this 3D noise effect on the extruded and bevel part. Okay, so I'm gonna go back to 3D view, and right now I'm gonna just save this document, so just in case, you know. And what we have here in the scene is camera, and we have this empty here in the middle of logo object. Now I'm going to use this empty as a point to which camera points to. So we're gonna have easy camera rotation moment here. And about camera rotation, I don't care about this rotation. This is like roll. I don't care about that. I only care about pitch, and I care about jaw. Those are two rotations that I care about as far as this noise texture is concerned. So I'm going to rename this empty to camera aim, and I'm going to select my camera, and I'm going to use constraint on it. So here, this link icon here, I'm going to use track to constraint, and I'm going to select camera aim, empty camera aim, and I'm going to use -Z and Y here. And now when I move my camera, it always points to that empty in the middle. So that's going to make things easier for us. You can also move this empty around to create more complex animations. So now what I want to do is I want to have this empty in the middle rotate twice as fast as this camera rotates around the logo object. Okay, so to do that, I'm gonna need driver on its Z rotation value. You can see this Z rotation. This is the Z axis. So I'm gonna add driver, manually create later, and I'm gonna open my graph editor here. And here, instead of F-curve, I'm gonna select drivers. And now we already have that value selected. I'm gonna open this side menu, go to drivers, and right now it's 0, but it's scripted expression. And I have a variable here. I'm gonna pick camera here. I need to get camera Z rotation, and it's gonna be Z rotation here. And right now it's gonna copy, empty is gonna copy camera's rotation, because I'm gonna type var here. And you can see it here in top view. As I rotate camera, it matches its rotation exactly. But as I said, I need it to move twice as fast, so ×2. So now when I move the camera, you can see it's rotating twice as fast. Nice, that's what I wanted to do. Now let's see that in 3D view again. Actually in rendered view, sorry. So rendered, and as I move camera around, let me just select camera and move it around. You can see that this reflection is now behaving kind of what we wanted to do. Looks good already. But now there's a slight issue here. You see, if there's a highlight right in the middle of the logo here, and we'll rotate the camera, it's just going to rotate around itself, and it's not going to move at all. So we're going to fix that by duplicating this empty. Oh, sorry, I'm going to delete that. Actually, it's going to be difficult by moving everything under this rotated angle. I'm just going to select camera and move it to 0, and 0 for Y as well. Move it a little bit to the side. Yeah, now everything is lined up. So I need to Shift D and copy this object and move it slightly out of the logo center. This is going to be our new origin. And I'm going to Shift click and Control P and parent to object. So now when I move the camera, this object is rotating around the central camera aim object, but it keeps its driver, so I'm going to delete that. Delete single driver. So it's not going to rotate now. It's just going to rotate around the center, not around itself. Maybe I should move it a little bit further away. Let's go to 0 again. Move it slightly further. Yeah. So this is what I want. This is going to be our new texture origin. Now I'm going to rename this empty to, instead of camera aim 001, it's going to be texture mapper. Okay, extra space there and here. So another thing that I want to do is to address the camera up and down pitch rotation, right? That's what I said earlier. Just save this file. So if I grab my camera and move it up and down on Z-axis, it's gonna pitch, right? It's gonna rotate upward and downwards. So to match that, I'm gonna need this empty to move up and down as well, and as I said, like twice as fast, right? So okay, I'm gonna go to node editor now and change that origin for the texture. So in texture coordinates under object, I'm gonna select empty texture mapper. I'm gonna do the same for bevel object as well. And now it should work fine. Let me just switch to rendered view so I can test it. I move the camera and it seems to me that it's working as expected. I mean, up and down motion doesn't work, but left and right, like what is it called, jaw motion, works. But if I move this origin up and down, I can see how it's gonna behave when I move the camera up and down, like pitch it. So let's select that. Okay, so I'm gonna select this empty, and I'm gonna influence its not Z rotation but Z location, up and down, right? So I'm gonna create driver here. I'm gonna go to graph editor and to drivers again. Here it is, Z location, and again I'm gonna use variable as camera Z rotation or X rotation. Wait, let me check. Which one is it? It doesn't react. It's linked with that track to constraint. So let me just turn that off, just so I can test it. So which rotation is it? Up and down pitching. It's X, right? It's X. I was right. Let me enable that again. And now under drivers, I'm gonna pick camera X rotation, and that's gonna control this empties upward motion. So it's gonna be var times 2, right? So let me just check that from the side view. So I move the camera up and it works, but it's reversed. So I'm gonna add a minus at the beginning of this expression. Let me check it now. I think that works. I think that's gonna look fine. It kind of moves faster than... Actually, this is not correct, as this is like rotation, and this is the other thing is location. But let me just check it. If it checks out in rendered view, it's fine. I think this looks good. I think that's gonna...
just realistic enough for a fast logo opener, whatever. Now let's set up a quick animation so I don't need to move my camera every time. I'm just gonna set camera to rotate around this object so we can do the final animation on it and test the top and extrusion as well. So I'm gonna go to material view. I'm gonna select camera and press I and add location keyframe. I'm gonna move to like frame 70 here, and I'm gonna move camera. I'm just using the grab like G option, and it's just tracking this central empty. So using G, I'm moving my camera around, so something like this maybe, and then I'm gonna add a new keyframe to location. So now we have this camera motion happening. As you can see, Blender doesn't update the noise texture on the edges on the extrusion, so that's very bad for previewing this. But you need to use like rendered view. But what you're gonna do, sometimes you just have to imagine in your head how it's gonna look at the end. So here on the render view, you can see reflections happening as we would expect them. I think that looks good. Now we need to deal with the top part of the logo. So here we have like, what did we call it? Logo front. I'm gonna go to node editor. I'm gonna make sure that's selected, and I'm gonna add another noise texture here. So let me just remember what I have to do here. Basically, I need to repeat the same thing I did for those extrusion parts. This is useful. This is all gonna be same. I just need to add that noise texture, right? Let me just go to material preview, and under texture, I'm gonna go noise texture. Then I'm gonna add that blend converter, color ramp, sorry, and mapping node. It's all under vector mapping. Connect that. And texture coordinate, input texture coordinate, and I'm gonna use reflection this time, not object. And with reflection, it's cool that it's gonna update automatically. I don't need to do any of those empties thingies. So I just rearrange some stuff here. I'm gonna add mix shader. No, not mix shader. Mix color node. So I'm gonna add this to the second input of this color mix. I'm gonna set this to add, and now we can see some kind of reflection on top of the logo. I'm gonna scale this down, move these closer together to have some sharp reflections. Now this doesn't look that good. I'm gonna decrease this value to increase the size of these reflections. So let me just move it around. It's unfortunate positioning as I don't see any of it. So maybe 0.5 to make it bigger. You can also slide this around to get it where you want. This is starting to look good. So now it's just a matter of like getting it where you want it, like the best looking top reflection there is, and it's gonna take a lot of tweaking, and this kind of looks, I don't know, kind of okay. And I can also try for constant interpolation, but that's maybe too sharp for some people. I'm still gonna go with ease, and I'm just gonna try to connect these as close as possible to one another. So like this, I really want sharp, but not too not like crispy, jagged edge, sharp reflection there. Maybe play with these values to get a more precise setup. So this 0.46, and this is gonna be 0.48, 0.479. Okay, I guess that's okay as far as like sharpness goes. Now I just need to get the right setting to make it look good in this particular camera motion, right? So I'm gonna go back and forth with looking at how camera moves through this scene, and I'm gonna find the best one. Bear with me. Okay, so I'm gonna go with this one. Now I'm gonna go into some post-processing, but before I do that, I'm gonna add a slight depth of field to the front and the back parts of the logo. Most importantly, the front part, because you don't want people seeing that separated planes when they get close to camera, right? So I'm gonna go to select my camera. I'm gonna under depth of field, I'm gonna select the logo front object, and I'm gonna pick the size of 0.0012. I think that's fine. So you're gonna be able to hide some of imperfections in this technique by just having the front closest part in the out of focus area. So now, oh, I can't believe this was on CPU this whole time. So I'm gonna add viewer node here, and I want to achieve kind of a dreamy look with this template. So I'm gonna add a blur, filter blur node. I'm gonna blur it slightly, and let's enable backdrop here. And I'm gonna add, I'm gonna use fast Gaussian with relative, something like 2. I'm gonna do Y aspect correction. Obviously this is not the intended look, so I'm gonna add a mix node, and I'm gonna add original here and blur on top, blurred version on top of it, and I'm gonna select this to be overlay. Now this increases contrast a lot, so I'm gonna go to our color management, and I'm gonna pick filmic color management, and I'm gonna go for low contrast, like medium low contrast, low, very low contrast, medium low. So I'm gonna decrease the factor of this overlay node, and I can play with this blur even further, but this technique gives you a fast, like dreamy look. It bleeds color around the scene a little bit. So right now I think it needs a little bit more work. It's a little bit too weird in colors. Let's decrease contrast more with brightness contrast. So I'm going to use that to decrease artificially the contrast of the image, like this. Okay, so still a little bit weird, so I'm gonna go to our filmic and change to base contrast. Yeah, that I think this is gonna be fine. So let's save it, and I'm gonna do a test render now. And here it is. Let's play it. That's it. I think that looks fine. Not perfect, but good enough for motion graphics, right? Obviously for very complex camera motions, you're gonna have to do additional setups for those empties, and you're gonna maybe want to tweak some texture positioning here and there, but with most logos you'll be able to achieve this effect with this technique. So that's all for this tutorial. I'm looking forward to see what you guys make with this. Post me some videos or images of what you did. Keep blending, and I'll see you around. Bye.